Hey guys and welcome. Today we're gonna take a closer look at the BBC Ls3 5A speakers. I've owned this speaker for quite a while already and I made many videos on the speaker on this channel. However, today I wanted to take a second and re-review the speaker since for a few years it's been my reference. However, that is not the case anymore and I just wanted to correct some things that I may have said about the speaker in the past that aren't as true as I thought back then, and just update you with the newest information that I've collected on the Ls3 5As. In case you haven't noticed yet, the speaker is very old. As you can see, it looks pretty old as well. It was released in about 1975, I believe. That's when production started. However, the development started many years before that because the speaker has been in development by the BBC for quite a while. My unit is made by KEF, but many other British audio manufacturers got the license to manufacture the speaker, like for example Rogers, one of the most popular ones, or Spandor and some others as well. When they were released in 1975, they sold for about $430 a pair, which equals to around $2,000 when you take into account the inflation, which makes them rather expensive. And if you want a new version of the speaker or like a replica made by smaller manufacturers today, you can even pay up to $3,000 for a pair of these speakers. Let's quickly run down the specs before we get into my subjective impressions of the speaker. It's a two-way passive bookshelf speaker, as you can see. It has a 5¼ polypropylene KEF B110 woofer, as well as a KEF T27 1-inch mylar dome tweeter. As you can see, the tweeter has some kind of foam around it. I think they put it in there to help with the baffle diffraction from the less than ideal shaped baffle by today's standards, but we'll get into the issues of that later in the objective measuring portion of the video. The rest of the speaker looks pretty simple. It's just a box, it's well constructed, it's pretty heavy. On the back you won't find any ports since it's a closed or sealed design. You will only find the two sets of binding posts which allow you to bi-wire the speaker, at least on my unit. My unit is a bit newer, it's also happens to be some kind of special edition made by KEF, so I guess they included this as a feature. Many of the older versions just have one set of binding posts, or they feature some other plugs, some different connecting methods. Throughout the years, these speakers have been used in many different applications, so they offer a wide variety of different connecting options. But with my unit, you get these two binding posts that allow you to bi-wire the speaker. Now let's talk about my subjective impression of the speaker. Of course, it's not my very first impression since I've owned the speaker for some years already and I can't exactly recall what I thought in the first moments of listening to the speaker, but I will try to kind of recap what I think of the sound overall. Many of you probably already know what the speaker is famous for, which is its mid-range reproduction. That's why so many audiophiles love the speaker, and I can confirm that is what makes this speaker so special. They're also known for having very little low bass or very little deep bass, because of course it's a small old speaker with a sealed enclosure. There's not much deep bass to be expected here. And they're known for having a small hump in the upper bass region to compensate for the lack of low bass as well. The more I listened to the speaker throughout the years, the more I noticed that it may not be as neutral as I first thought it would be, especially as my own measuring methods and my own speaker designs progressed. I noticed that the speaker does add its own character, more or less significantly, to all the different tracks, and we'll talk about that today. First up, I want to say that I do still think that the tuning of the Ls3 is very nicely done. It's very well tuned, but it's not as perfect as I thought it would be. Starting in the bass area, which again is where you will hear this rather significant mid-bass hum to compensate for the lack of low bass. With acoustical tracks, this can be very beneficial because it makes the speaker sound bigger, more lifelike than it actually is. But with modern songs or songs that have many layers or very deep and full sounding vocals already in the first place, it can get a bit much, it can get a bit obnoxious sometimes, but I guess that's the sound they went for here. When it comes to the mids, this speaker obviously shines, has a very nice mid-range reproduction. I still love it to this day. Even compared to more perfect or more modern flat sounding speakers, I still think that the Ls3 holds up extremely well. The mid-range is very well balanced. It's not flat, it seems to have some kind of rising response towards the treble region. It doesn't add any extra super treble above 10 kHz. It doesn't have this sizzle, but it does add some clarity in the presence region, which is rather obvious, but also contributes to why the mid-range of the speaker sounds so nice to many people, including me. In case you want to use this as your main speakers in a main listening setup at home, I would advise you to get a stereo pair of subwoofers, or at least just one subwoofer, to fill in the lower octaves, since you will be missing that when you listen to the speaker for a long time. It rolls off really shallow, or it rolls off with just 6 dB per octave, which is normal for a sealed design. So you do get some lower bass notes, however they're not very strong. They don't come across with a lot of confidence, so if you really want the full experience, I would advise you to get a subwoofer with a speaker. Overall, the sound of the speaker is still fairly well balanced. It's not flat, but the tuning that they did add to the speaker seems rather well thought out. You can tell that they spent a lot of time engineering the speaker, they spent a lot of time listening to it, refining it, making it sound nice. So it may not be perfect on paper, but the tuning overall is very thought out, it's very well done. Lastly, let's cover imaging. The imaging of the speaker is surprisingly nice. I'm saying surprisingly since the baffle design of the speaker, which largely contributes to how well a speaker images, is not ideal. You can see the edges look pretty rough, the woofer is recessed, there doesn't seem to be any kind of physical time alignment between the tweeter and the woofer, so all of these things would have to be done in the crossover circuitry. But overall the speaker still images very nicely. It has nice depth, nice center stage, and many people love the speaker for the mid-range and imaging capabilities, and I can agree with that. It images extremely well, especially for a non-coaxial design, so no flaws to be noted there. Before we get into the objective part of this video, I want to give you a chance to make up your mind about the speaker yourself without any commentary, and just take a listen to a few tracks that I played over the speaker and recorded with my microphones. In my last video I included the sound samples at the very end of the video, which I kind of confused because the sound samples are supposed to come in after my subjective opinion, so you can form your own subjective opinion before we get into the objective measurement part of this video. With that being said, I'm using my binaural microphones like always, which require you to put up your headphones and listen to the recordings through headphones to get the most realistic results possible. So make sure to put them up and enjoy the short sound check.
Is it just a dream I'm having inside my fantasy? Come to me. You are in my thoughts, I never stray from the heart of you. Come to me.
So as you could hear, it does sound a lot better than the simple appearance and age make you believe. I think it still holds up very nicely to this day, even compared to the most modern speakers like the Ls3 or the Ls3 Meta, which I did have in for testing some time ago, but I never made a video about it. The Ls3 still holds up very nicely. I think it sounds better than most modern speakers. It has a very nice tuning again, and you can just tell that it's not perfect, but the engineers did spend a lot of time to think through the tuning of the speaker and really make it sound nice to the human ear. And that's why I think that it's still one of the leading speakers in its class today, and that there's a good reason why so many audiophiles and audio lovers like this speaker so much. Now let's reveal the objective data. that I took of the speaker and see if my subjective impressions or your subjective impressions align with what the data says. First, let's take a look at the on-axis stitched measurement of the speaker, which is where I take a gated measurement of the speaker and then mix it together with the near-field response of the woofer to get a close to anechoic measurement result. With this measurement, please ignore the dip around 6 kHz, which is only there if you remove the grills. And the first measurement, which is this one, has been taken without the grills. After this, I noticed that it helps to put on the grill, which you will see now. The speaker measures much nicer when you put the grill on, and it's intended to be listened with the grills on as well. So if you do listen to the speaker, make sure to always leave the grills on. And the following measurements will all be taken with the grill. However, this close to anechoic measurement, the stitched measurement, has been taken without the grill. So just pretend that the dip around 6 kHz isn't there. But now let's start in the bass region of the speaker. You can see it already rolls off at about 100 Hz, which is why you definitely need a subwoofer if you want to use this for your main system. After this, you can see the 2 to 3 dB bass hump, mid-bass hump, which has its center around 150 Hz and lasts until 300 Hz. Following this, until about 900 to 1000 Hz, the measurement looks pretty smooth, which is the infamous mid-range of the speaker. And then you can see it has the slight rising response, which I talked about before, which reaches, I think, plus 2, 3 or even 4 dB in some areas at around 5 kHz. After this, it doesn't really rise that much more. Again, please ignore the peak at 6 kHz. And above 10, 11 or 12 kHz, the tweeter slightly starts to roll off, which is why I said that there are no additional treble sizzles or something. So it doesn't have the typical rising response in the upper treble. It rather emphasizes the presence region where the mids are and where the ear is most sensitive. Overall, the measurement is kind of smooth. However, it's not that balanced. You know, the rising response is rather significant, which is plus 3 dB, I think, on average. And then the hump in the bass region is rather significant and audible as well. And that's why I said that it does add its own flavor to each track that you listen to. I think it's a well-tuned speaker, but as you can see, it's definitely a tuned speaker, which is not meant to be flat or super neutral. Next, let's take a look at the off-axis measurement, first horizontally. And I will say I was a bit surprised since, especially under steep angles, it doesn't look that nice. Again, I don't know the exact angles. It's close to 15, 30, 45 and 60 degrees, like in my last video. And you can see the steeper the angle gets, the worse the measurement looks. It doesn't roll off smoothly. You can see the woofer, or the range that is covered by the woofer, rolls off much steeper than the range which is covered by the tweeter, starting at about 2 to 3 kHz, which overall leads to a rather bright in-room response. The tweeter is way more omnidirectional than the woofer. The woofer already starts to beam in its operating range, which means that if you listen to the speaker off axis, you will lose a lot of output in the woofer range, and you won't lose a lot of output in the tweeter range, which, as you can see, results in this kind of step when you measure the speakers under extreme angles. Another reason why this may occur is the questionable baffle design. There are no smooth edges on the baffle whatsoever, and this can often lead to a critical off-axis response, which again you can see now. Next, let's take a closer look at the vertical off-axis response above the tweeter axis, and you can see it looks fairly well controlled. Everything looks nice and even except for the steep suck out between 2 to 3 kHz, which is where the crossover between the woofer and the tweeter happens. And for a non-coaxial design, this is a very typical phenomenon, and I would say it's even rather well controlled with this speaker. You can see the suck out may be rather steep, but it's not that wide. It's pretty narrow, which is a result of the acoustical centers of the woofer and tweeter being fairly close together, as well as the steep crossover slope that they used for this design. Now you can see the vertical off-axis response below the tweeter axis, and this one doesn't look that nice anymore. It has the same suck out at the crossover region of the woofer and tweeter. However, it's a bit wider than in the other measurement, and you can also see that it creates some kind of peak at 1.5 kHz. So if you can't listen to the speaker directly on axis vertically, make sure to go above the speaker and not below the speaker. In case you can choose between these two things in your setup, definitely choose the above tweeter axis vertically, since the response does look well controlled there and not that well controlled when you move below the tweeter axis. Next, I moved the microphone very close to the individual drivers to create a waterfall plot. This also revealed the crossover frequency between the woofer and the tweeter, which is about 2.5 to 2.8 kilohertz. I think in the specs it says 2.7 kilohertz, so no surprises there, but I just thought I would let you know. Now you can see the waterfall plot of the woofer, looks very clean, no problems there. The polypropylene cones don't really tend to have strong ringing or breakup, so it's not really a surprise. Plus the drivers that we used in the speaker were pretty good back then, and still today they're solid drivers. They were quite pricey as well, again made by KEF, so they're high quality drive units, and you can see it doesn't show any kind of ringing, any kind of strong resonances in the audible range, so everything looks perfect here. The same thing goes for the tweeter, nothing to mention here, zero problems, clean waterfall plot. The second disappointment of the video is that I will not be able to provide you with any self-made pictures of the internal components or drive units of the speaker, which is because I'm kind of afraid to take it apart. It's a very old speaker, it was very expensive, and there are more than enough pictures online of the internal components, so I thought instead of risking to break my speaker, I will just show you some of those pictures. And you can see the internals look alright, there's a lot of dampening, the woofer and tweeter look like decent drivers. The woofer does have a stamped steel frame, which is not ideal, however it doesn't produce any audible or measurable ringing, so I guess the woofer construction is pretty solid. And the crossover looks alright as well. The parts aren't very high-end. You can see kind of cheap capacitors and iron core inductors, which are not the best or not the most high quality parts that you can use for a crossover, but you do have to kind of defend the engineers, since they definitely had to meet a price tag here or a price target, and if you have such a big crossover with so many different individual parts, it's kind of difficult to make all of them high quality and high-end parts, since if you use the most expensive parts in the entire crossover, this speaker would probably be 3 times the cost. So for the price target that they had to meet, the parts are alright, I guess, but not ideal. So if you own the speaker and you plan on upgrading some of the components, you could start in the crossover section and just replace the low quality parts with more high quality parts of the same value. However, in this case, some people, some hardcore Ls3 fans may argue that the engineers of the BBC tuned the speaker with the sound of the low quality parts in mind, which means that even if you replace the cheap parts for more expensive parts that technically sound better, you would ruin the intended sound signature of these speakers. I don't know how much I should believe in this or how true it is. I'm sure that they have taken some consideration into how the parts sound, so I personally wouldn't exchange the parts in the crossover of my speaker, but I guess I will just leave that up to you. Now that's been pretty much it of this video. Once again, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it was informative or entertaining for you. I hope you could take something away from it, and I just hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like or subscribe to the channel to don't miss out on any uploads in the future. And until then, have a great time, and I will see you in the next video.